Witch's Brew. I became interested in the Nightshade family after attempting to dig up the old-time roots of the modern Wiccan religion. For those of you who do not know, Wicca is a religion based on the pre-Christian practices of Europeans, revived and supplemented by Gerald Gardner, Doreen Valiente, and others less than 100 years ago. Much of the religion was lost and material was added to the point where it was hard to tell what was original and what was not. One practice that is well known to be very old is the use of the entropine-containing plants in ointments and brews in what amounted to the method of shamanistic journeying. It was my hope that recreating this experience would help me understand the old religion better, as the altered state would be timeless, unchanged in nature by the influences of modern life. I should mention that this experiment was taken without much direct spiritual guidance. Most modern witches do not use nightshade, and I found that only one member of my coven had any experience with Belladonna, and it was a one-time thing. I do not use drugs beyond alcohol and occasionally cannabis, but did experiment with harder drugs in college, including mushrooms, LSD, and meth. I was aware that Belladonna is quite dangerous and did considerable research first. It was at that time that I learned that nearly all those using Belladonna are the related to Torah-reported difficult experiences. While this was discouraging, it did not affect my goal. I was not seeking pleasure, but knowledge. I obtained 4 ounces of dried Belladonna roots through the mail. I did not have a scale, so I measured the volume, which was 3 cups. Therefore, a rough estimate of the density is 0.8 grams per teaspoon. The roots were like a fine mulch and could easily be measured by teaspoons. First experience. I wanted to start small to see the effects. The smallest spoon I had was the 1/8 teaspoon, approximately 0.1 grams. I steeped the Belladonna for 10 minutes and then drank the cup. At this level, the Belladonna acted as a sedative. I began to feel relaxed, content, and very grounded. It was similar to the feeling I got after meditating. The feeling faded after about an hour. I noticed especially vivid dreams that night. Second experience, several weeks later. I was unsure what dosage to use for the ritual I was planning, so I decided a second low-dose experiment was in order. This time I used a half teaspoon, or about 0.4 grams. I also lengthened the steep time to about half an hour. Shortly after drinking the tea, I began to feel a slight euphoria, which was unexpected. The vision came in focus, and the light from the TV seemed to change unusually fast. I looked over at my, yes, all-black cat who was yawning, and her appearance seemed, well, hilarious. I started laughing in an almost maniacal way. Seeing the state I was in, my husband began to tease me and do many of the things one does to a tripped-out person, and I found that I was susceptible to thought-looping and generally trippy thinking. I began to notice streaks of light out of the corner of my eye. I also had excess energy and kept walking around the living room aimlessly. There was a slight impairment in my ability to walk normally, but nothing major. Similar to being tipsy but not drunk. Speaking of drinking, I was thirsty. I drank water and it helped, but it seemed like there was a thin layer of something over my tongue. My dried throat appreciated the water, but my tongue still had that dry, kind of slimy feel like before you brush your teeth in the morning. After about 2 hours, the feeling faded and I was left with an antsy, on-the-edge type of sensation. Then it became tiredness, exhaustion in fact. I went to bed shortly afterward. I do not recall if my dreams were affected, but I did notice blurred vision and occasional faint light flashes the next day. Third experience, about 2 weeks after the last dose. The day of reckoning. After the last experience, I settled on a dose of 1.5 teaspoons to 1.2 grams of Belladonna roots steeped in 2 cups of water for a period of about 45 minutes. As it was steeping, I cast a strong circle, casting 3 times each with the anthem, salt water, and incense. Then I stated my intent to learn the way of the old ones. Next, I called each quarter and presented the tea, asking the presiding element to bless it. From air, I asked for mind expansion. From fire, the inner vision needed to truly see. From water, the ability to flow with the experience. And from north, protection from physical harm. Finally, I called the Lord and the Lady and asked for the blessing of true knowledge of the old ways. I consumed the tea and waited. and waited. I put on various CDs in an attempt to take my mind somewhere. It didn't work. All I felt was boredom. Was it possible that the roots had lost potency, I thought? But then I got up to go to the bathroom and realized I could barely walk. Depth perception was off and the floor looked like it was coming at me. Moving my legs hurt like I was stretching them beyond their limits, though I was only taking baby steps. I found I had to walk in a near crouch and hold on to objects every step of the way. Later, moving became easier but still difficult. After a treacherous trip to the bathroom, I engaged my husband in conversation, and this relieved much of the boredom, but I still felt little head change. I tried reading my cards, but tarot seemed to have no interest for me. I began to notice an ache in my muscles and realized they were quite tense. When not talking to my husband, I read from a book on Irish witchcraft and found it unusually interesting. I bought the book because I know next of nothing of Irish practices and quickly found that I didn't care for them or consider them interesting. 3 hours after consuming the tea, I still felt nothing even vaguely spiritual. My husband brewed a second cup with an additional half teaspoon in hopes that would push me over the edge. After the second cup, I felt more relaxed. Maybe this won't be a waste of an experience after all. I tried reading my cards again and found them much more informative. I was definitely getting more from the reading than normal, but not more than any physically good, so not sure if it was the Belladonna. Now, I did find trance music interesting and noticed the flashes of light coming back. I went into the darkened bedroom to listen to trance and watch the visuals. Here is where I got the only spiritual effects. The light flashes started to become shapes and eventually eyes. Some were human eyes and some were animal eyes. I saw the eyes of hawks and eagles, tigers and lions, even fish. At one point I was looking at what I swear were my own eyes, like looking at a reflection, and they morphed into the eyes of a tiger. I now consider the tiger my power animal and keep a statue of one on my altar. I also saw what looked like people, the old witches perhaps, caught in various ritual poses. Unfortunately, the flashes were just that. They lasted only a second or less, and I was unable to get a clear picture of what was being shown to me. Some of the flashes became intense, blinding light, like when you see a very nearby lightning flash. The light show began to get repetitive, eyes and more eyes. I wanted to tell them I needed more, that I got what I thought I could from the eye imagery. Eventually I went back to my book and switched between reading and watching the eyes for the rest of the night, until sleep came perhaps 10 hours after ingestion. But I had to get up several times during the night to pee, but I found peeing difficult and downright painful. I knew this stuff would dry me out, but why did I feel the need to pee if the urine wasn't there? I should also mention that I got the thirst effects without this experience as well and drank Gatorade throughout the day. While water continued to almost glide over my tongue, the Gatorade quenched my thirst well. When I woke the next morning, I noted lingering difficulty walking and light flashes and streaks, as well as blurriness. For several days, I found that it was difficult to read smaller print due to lack of focus. I wear glasses for astigmatism, and the world after Belladonna looked the same through my glasses as it usually does without them. This effect faded slowly and was gone after 2 weeks. The random light flashes also faded in about the same amount of time. Balance was normal in 2 days. Conclusion. The experiment was kind of a bust. Some imagery was presented that helped me, but I never had an aha moment or felt that I received knowledge of the old ones not found in the book. I am glad I did it and feel that I do know more about the effects of Belladonna and therefore what it is like for the old witches to go through this, even if I never really journeyed. I find it odd that I had the strongest mental effects at the 0.4 gram dosage, and I think I may have experienced a tolerance due to some of the drug still being in my system at the time of the full ritual.